Brothers and sisters, if you walk onto a college campus and ask the first student that you meet, where do we come from? Darwin will most likely be the answer. Now, the idea of evolution through survival of the fittest is appealing. Indeed, it seems to reflect the reality of the world in which we live. Ask any small business owner. But there are difficulties. Even in Darwin's time, there were difficulties. One small consideration, the fossil record. It records a sudden explosion of life in the Cambrian era. A myriad of things, of living things, came into existence, and this largely without antecedents. Darwin suggested that life was the product of slow incremental change over an immense period of time. Wholly random and chance variations occur, and those that are useful are maintained through natural selection. So here we have the mechanism of random occurrences occurring, and the occurrences that are useful for survival are maintained. Sounds reasonable enough. Furthermore, according to Darwin, all life evolved from a simple organism and branched out in a sort of tree-like pattern, if you will. The fossil record, on the other hand, shows most animals appearing at more or less the same time rather than branching out from a simple form. The major challenge to the theory of evolution is to explain the large-scale changes that lead from one order or class to another, as the transitional forms are absent in the fossil record. In other words, how do we get from whale to mouse to kangaroo to giraffe to buffalo to alligator? Those changes, those transitional forms are absent in the fossil record. There are plenty of transitional forms at the level of genus and species. In other words, you can see the carrier pigeon evolving, Darwin's finches evolving, and so forth. You can see the evolution within a species, within a genus. But where are the transitional forms at the level of phylum, class, and order? Darwin, a man of utmost integrity, acknowledged this. He noted that the fossil record of his kind was most imperfect. He postulated that further research and exploration would yield evidence in support of his hypothesis, and that if it was not forthcoming, it would constitute a rebuttal. Today, nearly 159 years since the publication of The Origin of the Species, Darwin's hypothesis remains controversial. Let's go deeper. The idea of evolution was not original with Darwin. In one of the most remarkable events in intellectual history, Alfred Russel Wallace came up with the concept before Darwin was able to publish. It happened in February 1858 on a remote island in the Malay archipelago. It happened. An Englishman, Alfred Russel Wallace, in the middle of nowhere, was suffering from an attack of malaria. Feverish in his delirium, suddenly he saw it. He saw it. A vast panorama unfolded for him. The most primitive species, an amoeba or protozoa, gradually evolving through immense eons of time into sea creatures, birds, land animals, the guiding mechanism being survival of the fittest. Between bouts of fever, Wallace gathered sufficient strength and energy and wrote a detailed essay explaining his theory and sent it along with a covering letter to Charles Darwin, who he knew from correspondence was interested in the subject of evolution. This was essentially the same theory that Darwin had been ruminating on for over 20 years, but never got around to publishing as he continued to collect evidence. Wallace's paper prodded Darwin to rush out his famous book the following year, in part to avoid being scooped by Wallace. Darwin panicked on receiving Wallace's letter, writing privately that his life's work was smashed. A couple of his distinguished friends, geologist Charles Lyell and botanist Joseph Hooker, came to the rescue, quickly organizing a joint presentation to the Linnean Society of London on July 1st, 1858, of an unpublished letter and manuscript by Charles Darwin on natural selection, together with Wallace's letter. This was indeed a singular event in the history of ideas. Yet Wallace's concept of evolution was deeper and more profound than that of Darwin. Darwin claims that all biological life can be explained through a blind, directionist process, a mechanistic, linear process of survival of the fittest and random mutation. Attributes in an organism will only develop when they accord the organism a survival advantage. Wallace, on the other hand, suggests that there are areas of the biological world beyond the scope of natural selection's operation. And he says that some purposeful intelligence must be called upon to explain their existence. For example, Wallace reasons that man's intellect, his reason, his artistic and musical ability, his wit, his talent, and most important of all, his moral sense, his kindness, compassion, honesty, and integrity, his knowing right from wrong, cannot be explained via the Darwinian mechanism of survival of the fittest and random mutation. Rather, these qualities must be caused by an intelligence that guided evolution. Wallace insisted that man's mind was created by a mind. In place of the primitive mechanism of evolution, we have a natural world that is designed. Call it, if you will, intelligent evolution. That is, evolution is a part of a designed and guided universe. In 1910, at the age of 87, Wallace granted an interview to a reporter. It is a bold declaration for intelligent evolution. It breaks new ground. Whereas Darwin says nothing about the origin of life, Wallace, the co-creator of evolution, postulates a definite act of creation. As he says, an honest and unswerving scrutiny of nature forces upon the mind this certain truth, that at some point in the Earth's history, there was an act of creation, a giving to the earth of something which before it had not possessed. And from that gift, the gift of life, has come the infinite and wonderful population of living forms. Then, in a subsequent act of creation, according to Wallace, man is given a soul or spirit. He says, nothing in evolution can account for the soul of man. The difference between man and other animals is unbridgeable. In reply to the question that the reporter asked, but in any case, you believe that there is purpose in creation? Wallace replies, it meets me everywhere I turn. I cannot examine the smallest or the commonest living thing without finding my reason uplifted and amazed by the miracle, by the beauty, the power, and the wisdom of its creation. Have you ever examined the feather of a bird? I almost think a feather is the masterpiece of nature. No man in the world could make such a thing, or anything in the very slightest degree resembling that. He goes on to say, the scales on the wing of a moth, for example, have no explanation in evolution. They belong to beauty, and beauty is a spiritual mystery. What is the origin of beauty? Evolution cannot explain. Why indeed are the monarch butterfly, a deer, and an antelope beautiful? It seems to me that Wallace nicely summarizes his work when he says, my creation is made as a man of science, as a naturalist, as a man who studies his surroundings to see where he is. And the conclusion that I reach in my book is this, that everywhere, not here or there, but everywhere, and in the very smallest operations of nature to which human observation has penetrated, there is purpose and a continual guidance and control. And in these words, in my humble opinion, he summarized his extraordinary lifetime as a botanist, and biologists going to the most remote and dangerous parts of the world, the upper waters of the Amazon River, for example, remote islands in Southeast Asia, the depths of the tropics, collecting insects, birds, animals of all sorts, a lifetime of operation and study. And he seems to summarize his observations by saying that everywhere, and even in the very smallest operations of nature to which human observation has penetrated, there is purpose and a continual guidance and control. Thank you, indeed, brothers and sisters. It has been a privilege to share these thoughts with you.